Thank you, Cahirlock. And firstly, I want to thank and acknowledge today's contribution from the CCMA, and it clearly reflects what's going on, the reality experienced by local authorities on the ground. I raised some of those same issues in the Seanad on March the 25th, and the Minister for State, Christopher O'Sullivan, I specifically pointed to the underutilisation of Tier 1 service lands and the severe staffing pressures in local authorities. And so I think what in your statement, in your opening statement, it's very clear that you see the same. So my questions are, in general, the challenges that are facing housing delivery, what do you see are the most significant obstacles to housing delivery in Ireland today? And how do issues such as land availability, planning regulations and the infrastructure affect the timely delivery of the housing projects that you've mentioned? And then thirdly to that, what role does the CCMA play in addressing those same challenges, both at local and also national levels? Another question I have is regarding the main funding constraints facing the local authorities, such as Wexford, and in meeting their housing targets. I work closely with Wicklow, Kildare and Dublin on housing, and another question regarding that is, do you believe the current government funding mechanisms are sufficient to support the delivery of social and affordable homes? And are there alternatives and innovative funding models that we're not considering, perhaps that are being used internationally, that we could adapt and could be applied to the housing market in Ireland? I also have had many people approach me regarding planning delays, bureaucracy, and I know that has been mentioned many times. So another question is, how do the delays in the planning process and the ability to deliver housing for local authorities in spite of planning delays? One email that I got was that if a person wishes to buy a house in, let's say, Meath, it's 5 years from the time of looking at the land until they get the keys finally, with all the planning, building, etc. So there's huge planning delays. And I'm just wondering, are there specific legislative or regulatory reforms that you believe would streamline that process? And public-private collaboration, I'm wondering, with the Celtic Tiger and the issues that we had before, where private developers, there was big issues, let's just say, in the bank bailouts. But I'm wondering now, what role do private developers play in supporting housing delivery, and how can collaboration between public and private sectors be strengthened? And once again, are there innovative housing models, partnership models between public and private internationally? Finally, looking ahead, how can we future-proof housing policy in Ireland? How can we make sure that it's sustainable in the long term, given the population growth? And what measures can be taken to improve affordability and accessibility for key demographics, including young buyers and renters, specifically in relation to what has happened in Dublin regarding the tenant in situ, the budget that has been annihilated. And finally, you mentioned dereliction grant with my colleague Brian Stanley. I think it's something like 11,000 applicants for the dereliction grant and vacant homes. And I think it's a wonderful initiative that could change town centres, etc. But I think in practice it's not working, in that I think there's 11,000 applications, but I think there's only something like 1,450 after being paid out. So I'm not too sure of the exact figures, but that should be a grant that encourages individuals to take home ownership, invest in a derelict vacant home, and it's everything to win for. But I have one case that I'm dealing with at the moment, and he's been put through the mill, and he's shown me the house before, all the pictures. It was derelict, there was no roof, no windows, and he's nearly had to give his blood type to prove that it actually was derelict in the first place. So I just feel people are guilty until proven innocent when they're applying for the dereliction grant. So thank you for taking my questions. I know there was a lot of them.
Thank you. Thanks, Cahirlock. And the single biggest constraints, as I've outlined in the opening statement, are the availability of land for local authorities and the availability of staff to local authorities, the funding of staff to local authorities to progress those projects on that land. As regards to CCMA, the CCMA, I suppose there's a twofold function the CCMA has when it comes to housing. The first one is that we feed in through the Housing Committee into the formulation of policy and plans as a stakeholder into the Department of Housing. And secondly, the CCMA and the Department fund the Housing Delivery Coordination Office that's housed in the Local Government Management Agency. And that's a team that coordinates the activity of the 31 authorities in terms of social and affordable housing and shares best practice, gathers our data on our housing projects, on our land banks, and I suppose coordinates the programme and the activity and acts as a single point of contact, if you like, on issues for the department and for people like ESB and Éireann. On the funding constraints, I suppose there's two funding constraints to local authorities. The first one for the cost rental schemes, as we mentioned earlier, is the ability of local authorities to borrow for cost rental. But what's equally importantly with cost rental is local authorities, because of the volume of capital that could be tied up in cost rental and the fact that, you know, the housing market has a certain level of uncertainty to it, local authorities do require some sort of a backstop when it comes to that borrowing. That if, for example, rents fall and if the income stream that they've borrowed is based on falls away, that could have serious financial implications for local authorities. So we need to have an understanding of what the safety net is there for local authorities when it comes to that borrowing. And obviously then the other issue for us is the funding of significant extra staff resources to see that step change and that significant increase in delivery. On the innovative funding models, one of the issues we hear from the private sector is the interest rates that are charged to house builders for their projects. And they are, some rates that I've heard that developers are being quoted are a multiple of, you know, the ECB rate or a multiple of what you would get if you left your money on deposit in the bank. And that seems to be adding significant extra cost to the cost of providing houses, and in some cases is making schemes unviable. So I think if you're looking at innovative funding models, it's about really making finance available to house builders to be as competitive and as cost effective and, let's be blunt about it, as cheap as possible, so that those costs aren't passed on to the cost of delivering housing. On delays in planning, well, first off, local authorities use the Part 8 process, which is a statutory process. Generally speaking, there aren't delays. It works very well. It's a partnership approach between the council officials and the councillors on getting schemes through Part 8. As regards private sector planning applications, local authorities are on a statutory time frame, so it's a very predictable time frame. Where planning can come unstuck is where there's appeals to Bord Pleanála or judicial reviews. But under the new Planning and Development Act, Bord Pleanála or Commission, the new Commission will have statutory timeframes for considering appeals. So that issue about timeframes should be addressed under the Planning and Development Act as that's rolled out. On public-private collaboration, there's a lot of that going on at the moment where we partner with developers. I suppose the next stage for delivery of local authority housing on local authority owned land is the move towards development under licence. Some local authorities have led the way on that, and it's a very efficient way of delivering housing, utilising private sector collaboration, but still delivering public housing on public lands. Future-proofing housing policy, and this would be, I suppose, a personal opinion. If you want to have a sustainable housing supply, irrespective of what tenure it is, control land. If we control land and the availability of land to people who want to build houses, and we control it being fed into the market for house constructors, we control the supply of housing. At the moment, we don't have effective state levers to control that supply of land and getting it built on and serviced. And that's the key issue for future housing policy. And on the vacant homes grant, yeah, it has been successful. I think probably the reason the payouts are quite low is because it takes time to get a builder, get the works done, make the claims in. So the payout is the very last process in it. But there has been a huge take-up on it. There's been some fantastic projects done around the country, and I think it is really working and is to be welcomed. and it will see it's, you know, it's a relatively new scheme, and these things do take a while to get to the end point of them. By the time you've bought your property, engaged your builder, done the works and made your claim, it can be, you know, a bit of a period, but I think it is usually successful, and any issues like that, I'm sure they can be ironed out with local authorities. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Mr. Taff.